Welcome back to ABC News Live. We're following breaking news right now. Large plumes of smoke are filling the air in Gaza after we saw what looked like an explosion about 5 minutes ago. This comes after Israel declared war in response to a terrorist attack by Palestinian militant group Hamas over the weekend. At least 700 people are reported dead in Israel, including at least 9 Americans. Nearly 500 are reported dead in Gaza. ABC News senior Pentagon reporter Louis Martinez joins me now for more on this. Louis, what are you hearing, if anything, about these explosions?
Diane, what we're seeing is part of this offensive, if you will, that the Israeli Defense Forces are carrying out inside of Gaza. These are retaliatory airstrikes. The number is approaching close to 500 so far over the last 48 hours. And so this has been rolling over that time frame. These are airstrikes that the IDF has called in, targeting Hamas areas, sometimes in some cases buildings where Hamas operatives, senior Hamas leaders live. And you are seeing a lot of damage being inflicted. You're seeing those plumes of smoke, but there's also the human element. We are hearing from Palestinian authorities inside Gaza that about at least 500 people have been killed as a result of what is happening here, these airstrikes. So this is part of this rolling operation that you're seeing. There has been no ground operation yet. We are seeing lots of movement of vehicles headed towards that area, but yet not any ground incursion as of right now, though there are hints that that is coming soon.
Louis, this attack over the weekend was unexpected, but there is an extensive history here. So give us a sense of how we got here and what's being looked at in terms of what led to this.
Sure. The Gaza Strip is a very small area, Diane, very narrow, very small, but densely populated. There was a time when there were Israeli settlers inside there, so there was an Israeli military presence. They were withdrawn in 2005, and then around 2 years later, Hamas won some elections and ended up becoming the dominant power force inside of Gaza. Since that time, we have seen various military operations against Hamas because they've launched rockets as retaliation. There have been retaliatory airstrikes, and we've seen this kind of back and forth over the last 18 years. Some of these operations have been very large because what we've seen is that the Hamas militants have actually fired. We were talking right now in this incident of thousands. In the past, they've thrown hundreds, maybe 1,000 in some operations against Israeli targets. But what we're seeing now is that since Hamas took over, there was a blockade that was put in place, making sure that very few items went in terms of technology or particularly weapons. And it is that blockade that has inspired the ire of the Palestinians who support Hamas inside of the Gaza, mainly because they say that it is causing humanitarian distress among the civilian population, and that has just increased in magnitude over the last 18 years. So that's part of what the history is here. There's a large amount of really resentment against the Israelis because of that blockade, and potentially what we're seeing here is a result of that.
Louis, we've seen many conflicts in this region. How is this attack different?
This one is very different, Diane, because you spoke about these rocket attacks that we've seen Hamas launch, and then we've seen the retaliatory airstrikes from the Israelis. Some of those operations can have lasted days, weeks, but nothing like this on this order of magnitude, because we're talking about thousands of these rockets that have been launched into Israel and continue to be launched into Israel. And we're talking about numbers that are just significantly higher. At the same time, you saw militants breaking through this big fence, these barriers that Israel has erected around the border of Gaza just for self-defense purposes, and they broke through. And as we've seen, they broke through and attacked these cities and towns, Israelis on the Israeli side of the border. And there were close to 1,000 Hamas militants. That's the latest estimate. Close to 1,000 Hamas militants who crossed that border into these areas. And then we've seen the violence that ensued as a matter of that. So that's what makes this different. It's the number of rockets that have been fired by Hamas and that significant ground incursion, something that no one could have ever imagined taking place.
Louis, the leader of Hamas's military wing, as you pointed out, is saying that this is a response to the blockade. But the blockade's been going on for more than a decade, so why now?
Well, it appears to be the timing. Over the last 2 years, specifically this year, there's been increasing levels of violence in the West Bank. That's the other Palestinian territory that borders Israel. That's more on the east side. But the West Bank is under a different control than Hamas. Actually, there's a split between the Palestinian leadership. Hamas is independent from the Palestinian Authority, which has control of the West Bank. But inside the West Bank, you're seeing more militant groups building up. And Israel has really taken some strong initiatives this year in trying to put down some of these militant groups inside the West Bank. So I think even further resentment because of what's going on there. There's been some speculation that potentially Hamas was trying to work with Iran. Iran is Hamas's main backer of weapons and support. And when the thinking was that maybe Iran was trying to prevent this linkage, this movement towards diplomatic security between Israel and Saudi Arabia. We've been talking about this now for the last several months, that there might be some diplomatic recognition by Saudi Arabia of Israel, something that was, again, unimaginable, but was things that were looking that way. And so there has been some speculation that potentially this has something to do with that. But as of right now, U.S. officials are on the record saying that they've not seen anything definitive that indicates that Iran has been behind this operation being launched by Hamas.
And we're looking at live images there of Gaza. You can see plumes of smoke coming from multiple locations. Now we're following the latest. I want to bring in ABC's Inez de la Quatara, who's in Tel Aviv with more. Inez, what are you hearing right now?
Hey, Diane, yeah, you can see those massive fresh explosions in Gaza. It's still unclear what was targeted there, how many may have been killed or injured. Those images coming in live on Reuters as those explosions were happening. That's been the scene in Gaza throughout the day and through the night. Heavy shelling overnight, wiping out entire families, we understand. And mosques were targeted as well. At least 5 mosques have now been destroyed. And today, a refugee camp was also hit. At least 50 people dying in that one strike. This is the Jabalia refugee camp, which is the biggest refugee camp in Gaza. So a really dire situation there as the IDF really lays siege to Gaza. Israel's defense minister saying they are cutting off all fuel, food, and electricity supplies to Gaza. And like I say, this has been the scene all day, and we're expecting that to continue and get worse over the coming days and likely weeks, Diane.
Louis, the Saturday attack by Hamas that prompted Israel to declare war, it happened almost exactly to the day on the 50th anniversary of the 1973 Arab-Israeli War. How significant is that?
I think there is some significance to that, Diane, mainly because there is history here. We've talked about earlier about the history between the conflict between the Palestinians and the Israelis, and nothing shows that more than what happened in the Yom Kippur War. That was a surprise attack on one of the high holy days in the Jewish faith, and that was an attack launched by Syria and Egypt. And essentially, Israel was caught napping, and they did fight back and retake the territory that they initially had lost. But there's a lot of significance because of that event. And again, you can't miss the similarities here. This was a surprise attack this weekend. Yom Kippur, the war in 1973, that was a surprise attack. And there's when you talk to some officials, some experts, they talk about some significance, particularly in the Palestinian movement, to earlier incidents. They hark back by names, something like the September 18th movement that harks back to a certain date in Palestinian history. So here, I think there's some linkage that I think is worth exploring here, that potentially this is linked as a commemorative event, if you will, marking that 50th anniversary of the Yom Kippur War.
Hi, everyone. George Stephanopoulos here. Thanks for checking out the ABC News YouTube channel. If you'd like to get more videos, show highlights, and watch live event coverage, click on the right over here to subscribe to our channel. And don't forget to download the ABC News app for breaking news alerts. Thanks for watching.